我哋國安隊。
7月29日晚間，香港警務處國家安全處首次出擊，被警方上銬帶走的銷售青年，正是主張香港獨立的學生組織學生動員前召集人鍾漢良。
幾個警察啊？佢講咩？
分離國家。
哦。
港警國安處當晚共逮捕了3男1女，全部都是學生動員的成員。學生動員成立於2016年，曾經推動將港獨議題帶進校園討論。在國安法實施前夕，該組織宣布解散並成立海外分部。不過7月21日，臉書出現了創制獨立黨專頁，該組織聲稱是由前學生動員已經完成學業、身在海外的成員創立，主張不設底線的抗爭，成立香港共和國。港警國安處據此依照國安法逮捕了鍾漢良等人。
佢話係要不設底線咁樣去爭取呢個香港獨立，呢個好明顯已經係一個分離國家嘅情況嚟㗎啦。一般我哋喺處理一啲普通法嘅情況之下呢，係唔需要證明佢究竟佢有冇煽動任何人做呢樣嘢，佢只要做出咗一種嘅行為呢，已經係一種煽惑嘅行為嚟㗎啦。
這項逮捕行動證明了港區國安法的確是有牙齒的老虎，要讓反對派意識到，別再以為躲在鍵盤後面就沒事。
12個立法會選舉參選人被選舉主任裁定提名無效，12個人當中4個人屬於公民黨。曾經以抗爭派名義開記者會嘅16人，有6個人被取消資格，包括黃之鋒。
透過60萬人票選出來的12位民主派候選人，確定被取消參選資格。港府聲明指出，擁護基本法是立法會議員的基本憲制責任。支持香港自決、香港獨立或尋求外部勢力干預制裁香港的人，不可能真誠擁護基本法，也不可能履行立法會議員的職責。這讓民主派希望的35+計劃宣告破滅。
押後4年一度嘅立法會換屆選舉係非常艱難嘅決定。
而香港特首林鄭月娥週五宣布，在全城抗議的背景下，不得不引用緊急法，將原定9月6號舉行的立法會選舉推遲到2021年9月5號。英美兩國隨即發出聲明，譴責北京跟港府推遲選舉與取消反對派候選人資格的做法，是破壞中英聯合聲明的承諾。之前早已傳出港府將推遲選舉，因此這項宣布並不讓人意外。令人訝異的是，香港民主星火被碾熄的速度如此之快。
The national security law targets what China calls crime of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The law carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment, and in some cases, suspects could be sent to mainland China for trial. In an ironic twist, this new law has far more wide-ranging implications than the extradition bill, which sparked last year's protests. One of the most well-known faces of Hong Kong's democracy movement, Nathan Law, fled Hong Kong a day after the new law came into force. He's now in self-imposed exile in London so he can freely lobby foreign governments, as he did this week, meeting with US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. This would be considered a crime under the new law.
What is it about the national security law that worries you so much?
Well, the law is written in such a vague term that the Communist Party could interpret arbitrarily.
獨派學生被捕，流亡海外的羅冠聰等人也難逃無遠弗屆的國安法。
警方通緝6個身在海外嘅港人，涉嫌違反國安法，包括前立法會議員羅冠聰。
遭通緝的6人包括羅冠聰、英國駐港領事館前職員鄭文傑、香港人權及民主法案的推手朱慕明、本土民主前線前召集人黃台仰、香港獨立聯盟召集人陳家駒、學生動員前成員劉康。他們目前身處美、英、德等地。值得注意的是，被通緝的6個人當中，朱慕明是美國公民。
I am a U.S. citizen. I've lived in the U.S. For almost 30 years, for over 30 years. And so for them to claim that my exercising the rights that I have as an American citizen, lobbying and advocating for Hong Kong to the U.S. government, that is just outrageous. If I can be targeted, that means any American or any citizen of any country could be targeted.
他也是第一個因涉嫌違反國安法被通緝的外國公民。這6人未來只要入境香港，就會立刻被捕。港區國安法壓境，也讓這座國際金融中心陷入了困境。 根據香港美國商會的資料，有3%的人擔心北京的國安法，42%的人對前景感到悲觀。
Hong Kong is beginning to feel like a battleground or the new Berlin between the U.S. and China.
過去是泛民派議員，現在是香港行政會議成員的湯家驊，認為西方對北京制定港區國安法有着太多的偏見與誤解。
A lot of the criticism seems to be clouded with the fact that it was done by China, and that itself is a sin. The one country, two systems, demands that there should be mutual respect, not just from Beijing to Hong Kong, but also from Hong Kong to Beijing. The red line, as far as we see, is very simple. You don't go and advocate, a division of the nation. You don't advocate, independence of Hong Kong. So long as that issue is not touched, everything else is all right.
So what would you say to Hong Kongers who are afraid?
Well, have faith in our judicial system. Have faith in Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong.
在唯一一个能公然追思6·4的中國領土上，後國安法時代的香港還能延續這個傳統嗎？
As Hong Kong settles into this new reality, there are now big question marks hanging over whether the June 4th Tiananmen Vigil will ever be tolerated here again.
Clearly a lot of concern around whether June 4th and events to commemorate it will be allowed.
We'll find out next year. But as I say, there is nothing in any of the provisions in the national security law which changes the situation.
But I guess this is what I'm getting at, Ronnie. This is changing people's behaviours.
I think people need to understand. I think you need to understand that every law, whenever it's being introduced, will in some way change the behavior of the community.
This is not the original one, but here is just...
But it's this behavior change almost overnight that Rowena He sees as a red flag, hoping it won't bring an end to Hong Kong's long tradition of remembering what happened in Tiananmen all those years ago.
I think the biggest fear actually came from the fact that you do not know what's going to happen. And the only reason that we're still doing, so many of us are still doing what we are doing, despite the fact that we know it's difficult, is because we want the next generation to be free from all of this fear.